Welcome everybody to the CWPCA Virtual Safety Group webinar. And we're starting off the Safety Group webinar with our first safe work practice around air nailers. And by way of introduction, let me mention that air nailers are simply nail guns, but my advice is to keep it at a, nail guns have a certain connotation to them, and air nailers demonstrate, or the term air nailers demonstrates a level of professionalism that we want to bring to our presentations. The second point that I wanted to table is ask a very simple question. What entitles somebody like myself to give this presentation? And the next question is, am I competent to give this presentation? And that'll be a theme that I'll reinforce throughout the presentation, and it should be something that's important to you as well. Anybody who's giving training to any of your staff, your employees, has to be competent. And competency is defined by experience, knowledge, and training. So what entitles me to give this presentation is that I have a degree in occupational health and safety from McMaster School of Medicine. I have 30 years of experience in delivering this training, and I'm certified as a train the trainer with WSIB. So those are my qualifications. The agenda is that we'll, as you see in front of you on the screen, is that we're going to talk about introduce you to the virtual safety group, talk about your legal responsibilities around training, discuss what a safe work practice is, the steps in training, where to find copies of the documents that we'll be referencing on the CWPCA website. We'll talk about how to use these documents in training your staff. We'll discuss competency assessment and some best practices around documenting your safety training. So the virtual safety group was something we started earlier this year in response to a number of our members coming forward and saying, look, we need some help, in improving our professionalism, especially when we're being confronted by visits from various regulating agencies, such as the Ontario Ministry of Labour. We think there's an opportunity to get some standards across the industry and get some common language to be used when discussing safety. We know that at many locations we have best practices around, for example, spinning pallets at tables, repair technology, but we're not sharing them as a group, and we're certainly not sharing our safety best practices, which there's an opportunity to do that. We recognize that as a group we're probably not as good at delivering safety training as we could be, so that's an opportunity for the safety group. We definitely need to reduce our injury rates and improve our rate group performance. And last but not least, when you get a visit from the Ministry of Labour or WorkSafe BC or any of the regulating agencies, we want to be able to provide to our members documentation on work practices that meet their expectations. So that's what the safety group is all about. We'll talk a little bit about your legal responsibilities for employers. So these are taken out of the Occupational Health and Safety Act for Ontario, but they exist in every jurisdiction across Canada. They're fairly simple. If you want to find the complete list, you can go to page 13 of the Green Book in Ontario. If anybody wants some help in finding the other locating these responsibilities and other sources of documentation, send me an email and I'll dig them up for you. But you can pursue them. The points listed in red are important from the aspect that if somebody is badly injured in your workplace and the Ministry of Labor does an investigation and finds that your training is insufficient or inadequate, they're going to issue citations and possibly fines linked to these type of responsibilities. So, for example, in the case of a nail gun, if somebody fires a nail gun and it hits, for example, their hand and breaks several small bones in the hand, and that worker now loses the use of that hand, that can be deemed a critical injury, and you're going to either get a work order or a possible fine because of that. They'll cite these specific cases of inadequate training that would be the cause for that accident. So the procedures we're about to talk to seek to prevent that from occurring. Additionally, there are responsibilities for supervisors. I'll just bring the next page up. There it is, yeah. And in many cases, in the smaller businesses, the business owner is also the supervisor. So these responsibilities fall to you. And as a supervisor, your responsibility is to identify any potential or actual danger to the health and safety of the worker. Secondly, you are required by law to provide written procedures or work instructions to protect the worker. So what you'll see in the next little while are safe work practices that specifically look at the risks of engaging the use of an air nailer. And if your current procedures or practices don't identify those risks, then the ministry would say your procedures are deficient in that regard. So what we'll be providing you with is a standard that meets regulatory expectations. The third legal responsibility is around the person delivering the training. And in each jurisdiction across Canada, the expectation is the person delivering the training is competent. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have a degree behind your name, but what it does mean is that you have to have knowledge and experience in order to perform the work, and you have to have knowledge of your legal responsibilities under the various Occupational Health and Safety Acts, and you have to be familiar with the type of hazards that working with an air nailer will present to the worker. The point being here is don't ask an inexperienced supervisor or somebody that's not familiar with the work to do the training, because if the training is found to be deficient, that opens yourself up for, once again, a possible work order, or in some cases, if it's a serious accident, a fine. So the key point here is make sure that the person delivering the training is competent. So the next slide talks about when is training done, and there's basically four situations where training around an air nailer is required. So first is you have a new hire, you're bringing him into the job. Could be a worker on the floor on a repair table, or it could be a new supervisor or manager. Those people require induction training on the use of the air nailer. If we have a change in position, so for example, someone's taken off a saw line and put on the pallet repair, and he's unfamiliar with that, it's a new position to him, he requires training, documented training. There's an expectation that you do a refresher training, and my suggestion is that every 2 years at a minimum, you'd take people through retraining on the use of the nail gun. And then following a serious incident, let's say somebody does injure themselves, a typical injury around a nail gun is nailing through the webbing between the index finger and the thumb. That that incident would possibly be a medical aid, you would be required to retrain the employee and make sure that doesn't happen again. So, you know, there's basically 7 steps to training that I'm, you know, familiar with. You need to understand what your training needs are inside your organization. So typically a pallet repair operation, you'd have the ones that are forklift, saw operation, use of the nail guns, proper lifting. Those are all specific needs within the organization. Then you'd have to look at your priorities. So there are some aspects of training that are required by law. For example, in Ontario, WMIS is required by law for all new hires. Also, workplace violence training is also required by law. And initially, there's legal responsibilities that just came down the pipeline this year and is enacted in June, where you have to train supervisors and your staff on their legal responsibilities. If you want more information about that, contact our office. Following those establishing of priorities, you build your training documents. You consult with your safety committees inside your plants to make sure that you have a proper understanding of how the job is done. That's the primary role of the safety committee, is to evaluate the risks and provide advice. Once that's completed, management reviews it, makes sure the documentation is accurate, signs off on it that it is complete. You deliver the training, and then you validate that the training has met its mark. In other words, that the person you're training or the team that you're training understands and can demonstrate competency in the training. And that's often left out, in my experience. So the training is given, but there's no assessment at the end to make sure they understand, and that's how accidents occur. And then the last step in a training program is to make sure that the records of who the trainer was, the employees that were trained, and the course content is kept on file. So where is this located? Where are these documents that we're going to talk about located? And where they're located is on the CWPCA website. It's on the members only side under issues and initiatives, and you go down the tab to health and safety. And that's the repository for the nail gun safe work practices, the training documentation, as well as the training records. And these are all in a Word platform. They're not protected. And the PowerPoint is not protected either. And the idea is that you can go into these sites and download those documents and customize them for your own use. Now these are templates, okay? They're not designed to just be used without being customized, because we talk about specific types of nail guns and specific types of repair processes. So you need to be able to go in there, add your own pictures, describe your own process, but these are comprehensive in nature and should give you 95% of what you need to deliver some good safe work practices in your operations. So what I want to do is just briefly take you through the 3 documents that we're going to talk about. The first one is what we call a safe work practice. So as you can see on this, right at the top where the cursor is, it says CWPCA Health and Safety Manual. You put in that the name of your own company. Down below, the date issued is the date that you release that to your workforce. Any revision dates, so let's say you switch out your nail guns, you put in a new type of nail gun, and you have to revise your procedures, then you would have to revise your procedure as well, or your practice on this one. And importantly, who approved this in your business. And so each document that you release to your workforce and use as a training tool has to be signed off by somebody in authority. So this is a template that that I've used personally throughout my career in the safety management, and also it comes from our consultant. And this is a simple design. Now you can modify it any way you want, but this is kind of the standard that we would expect people to use. So right at the top we talk about risks and other hazards associated with workers using a nail gun. We talk about the triggers, which are a key part of how the air nailers perform. We discuss personal protective equipment. And you'll notice that what we don't talk about here is the use of counterbalance tools. Now, sometimes the regulating agencies mandate that the counterbalances be inserted into an operation. But in my experience is that if we have well-written, well-defined safe work practices, like you see in front of you, they're not going to ask that the counterbalances be installed. But that's something that we can perhaps discuss at a later time, but I want to just draw your attention to that. The next aspect is that we talk about the air supply, how to load the tool, what to do before using the tool, and then we go through some steps around the operation of the air nailer. So you'll see right in front of you where the cursor is. A key aspect of this safe work practice is the 12-inch rule. Now, when I talk to members and I ask them specifically, do you have a 12-inch rule? In many cases, I get the responses, never heard of it. This is important. That this is an important aspect of the practice, because you want to develop the behavior within your workforce that the hand is always at least 12 inches away from the firing area of the nail gun. And once you get that type of behavior strongly embedded into your safety culture, you're going to see a noticeable decrease in the number of nailing injuries. So we go through a very simple process that talks about what you do and don't do in the operation of a nail gun. Now, many people would say, well, is this too simplistic? No. My experience with the type of people we're dealing with, we want to keep it fairly straightforward. Do this, don't do that. And then at the end, we talk about some of the reference documents that we used. Now, in this case, we're featuring a Bostitch air nailer, and we would reference the Bostitch operational and maintenance manual as the document we used to build this document. If, on the other hand, we were using a pass load nailer, then under the reference section, you would use the pass load operation and maintenance manual. The other document we used was a U.S. reference guide for the use of air nailers. So if you're using any kind of reference document, you would put that at the end of your safe work practice. The second document that we want to talk about is the PowerPoint presentation. So people would say to me then, ask me, well, why do I need two documents? Well, the reason we do the PowerPoint is in a practical setting, you need to move out of the classroom and onto the floor to demonstrate how the air nailer works. And in that case, we want to shorten up the information, provide more visual descriptions of what you should and shouldn't do. And in my experience, what works better at the work table to demonstrate how to operate the air nailer is a PowerPoint presentation. So once again, what you see is a presentation that can be customized with the name of your company inserted. And then we go to simple procedures with plenty of visual representation on safe work practices. So you'll see in the picture, this individual is wearing a hard hat, his glasses, a dust mask, gloves, full PPE. You'll see that he's operating off a jig, okay? He's using two hands. He's keeping one hand away from that nailing face, okay? So these are all good best practices to be engaged in when you're operating that air nailer. On the next slide, we talk about, once again, reinforcing that 12-inch rule. Making sure that when they're nailing, they're checking for the nailing area to make sure there's no potential for what we call over-nailing or nailing on top of another nail, which is fairly common in the recycling business and the major cause for ricochet. We talk about making sure that any time the air nailer is left without being in operation, you disconnect the air. And that's a difficult practice to get your workforce to follow, but it's crucial that they start doing that if they're not doing it already to make sure that there's no accidental misfire. So at break time, at lunchtime, end of shift, or any time he leaves that workstation, the air gun should be disconnected. And most importantly, anytime the operator tries to remove a jam, the air line has to be disconnected. So we get right into the meat of it, and we talk about unsafe behaviors. And this is important, especially on new hires. And what we're talking about here is this concept of crossover nailing. So as you can see, this operator is nailing a bottom deck board into a stringer, and he's going to place the nails and then move the nail gun over his hand and go into the nail at center stringer position. This is exactly what we want to curtail, the type of behavior we want to curtail in the workplace. So you need to demonstrate this clearly to the operator at his workstation. Some of the other behaviors that we want to try and prevent in the workplace is people using the nail gun to nail or fire nails towards them. And then the bottom picture is that here's an operator trying to clear a jam. And jams are fairly frequent with nail guns due to maintenance challenges. Sometimes it can be linked to improper oiling. Sometimes it's, how nails are stored. But the key point we're trying to get across at this juncture is to make sure that all operators understand that they never, under any situation or example, try to clear a nail jam with the airline connected to it. Next step in the training then is to ask for, to provide practical demonstrations of how to operate the nail gun at the workstation, and you see them listed there. So in this situation, the person demonstrating the training would go through each of those steps to make sure that the operator has a clear understanding of, for example, how to load nails into the air nailer or what to do if the nail gun malfunctions. Now, if you remember a little bit earlier, I talked about competency assessments. So the the issue here is that in most of the training that I've seen being delivered, it's a one-way type of delivery, and then once the training is done, the operator is released to the workforce and say, you know, out you go. That's often where I would call the trainer, set him aside and say, look, you don't have any appreciation for whether the worker understood what you were saying. And this is absolutely crucial when you're delivering training, especially around a nail gun. Our workforce, sometimes English is not the first language. Sometimes there's comprehension issues. So I've always made a practice of insisting on a competency assessment. And what we would ask for then is to demonstrate, for the operator to demonstrate his knowledge of what he's just been trained on. And the key point is that in many cases he won't be able to get this right the first time, and it'll demonstrate to you that you have to go in and retrain him until he gets it right. So be prepared at this juncture to say, look, perhaps it wasn't fully understood and I'll have to go back in and retrain him. But it's better to get that done now at the outset of his career with your company than to have somebody injure themselves on the first or second week of the job. So we'll just go back to the to our presentation. There we go. Okay, so so those two documents can be found in that link that says Safe Work Practices. So just to reiterate, they're in a Word and a PowerPoint presentation. They're not protected. That means you can pull them down from the website and use them to be customized for your own particular operation. If you read through that presentation, you'll see there's a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is there for a reason. It's to emphasize that this is a template. It represents the best knowledge we have around these safe work practices, but they must be customized to your operation and reviewed through your Joint Health and Safety Committee. So the last part of the training is just to go over what we've prepared for you. First of all, we've prepared a safety standard, or what we call a safe work practice, which is a written outline on how to perform a task that ensures that there's minimal risk to people and the equipment inside your facility. Now, some safe work practices, such as lockout tagout, which we will be releasing to the industry in approximately 6 months, that requires a procedure. And a procedure is different from a practice in that it goes on a step-by-step basis in chronological order from start to finish on how a particular task is to be done. So just to understand, just to make sure that everybody understands, there's a safe work practice used for situations like the use of air nailers. However, when you're doing work that has a much more serious consequence like lockout tagout, we would require a procedure. The second tool that we've provided in this presentation is a training presentation, and it's designed to be customized to your workplace. The narrative has been shortened up. It has more visual representation of the workforce or the workplace. It can be used in a classroom setting, but is designed primarily to provide practical training at the workstation, in this case a repair table. and it incorporates a competency assessment, which will give you a warmer feeling, or certainly assure yourself that the person being trained has understood the course content. And the last item is training records. So this is how, and I've used this for many, many years, is a, once again, this can be customized, is that this is a list of everybody that you're training. We have their name printed with a signature so it's clearly understood who got the training. We have the person delivering the training, the date, and the company that is the employees are working for. And the way I've done this to the satisfaction of the regulatory agencies in each of the provinces is I've attached that and the training course content behind it. So they know exactly what the worker was trained on, who delivered the training, and at what time. And if you can provide that in a file folder or from a binder when asked by the regulatory agency, in my experience is they buy with the competency and the quality of the work, and the investigation more smoothly because of that. So that's the presentation total. Just to reiterate, we have the presentation will be on file within the website, and you have 3 documents that you can pull down, customize, use in your own operations. We've talked about what constitutes a good quality training program, and we've talked about your legal responsibilities to provide such. So at this time, I'll take any questions. And basically, we're at the end of the webinar, but if there's any questions that you want to ask me, fire away. Okay, I don't see any questions popping up. Thank you for attending our webinar. If you have any suggestions on the content or the process, please get a hold of me at our Ottawa office. And thank you.